And we are live! Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Mishnah Mastery! Woo!
Millions watching thousands watching. It's only 4.
Look at that. My in-house promotion. Okay, so guys, congratulations, please God, are in order, because tonight we are going to try and go through chapters 10, 11, and 12 of Maseches Chullin, and in so doing, we will complete Maseches Chullin. So we're going to get it up on the screen over here. Thumbs up if you can see that. Oh, we're in the wrong chapter, so that's really not going to help us very much at all.
It would help me.
Oh, sorry, no, we're not going to do... silly me. We're going to do 12, 11, and... What are we doing tonight? I thought we were finishing tonight. What have I prepared for us?
10.
Yeah, 10, 11, 12. Why are there so many chapters on the screen there? Okay. Gosh, this has all got to be edited out in post. That is horrendous. That is horrendous. What is going on with the screen here? Why does it think there's 14 chapters of Zvachim? Okay, oh, that's why I need to be in Chullin. Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Let's try that one.
7 because I've got to go to this Jewish place up the top of the road.
No problem. Yeah, all right. Shush. I opened up the wrong one. There we go. Chullin. There we go. 10, 11, and 12. That's what we're going to be doing tonight, and we're going to get started now. So, buckle up, guys, because here we go. So, chapter 10 of Maseches Chullin. That was why I was in the wrong Masechta on the screen. So you can all see it there, and we're going to be talking about slaughtering animals again. And there's very interesting halacha. According to the Torah, we are supposed to give 3 gifts to the Kohanim from every animal that gets sacrificed. We're supposed to give the zroa, which is the forearm. We're supposed to give the lechayim, which is the jawbone. And we're supposed to give the keva, which is part of the stomach. So this is a mitzvah in Parshas Shoftim, and any time we're sacrificing an animal, a profane animal that's not going to be used in the Beis HaMikdash, we are supposed to give those pieces to Kohanim. And it's very interesting, because if we see the opening line of this chapter, Hazroa v'halachayayim v'hakeva nohagim ba'aretz v'v'chutza la'aretz. Now we're supposed to give these 3 portions, whether we are living in Eretz Yisrael or outside of Eretz Yisrael. Bifnei habayis v'shalom bifnei habayis. Whether the Beis HaMikdash is still standing or whether it's not still standing. B'chulin aval lo b'mikdashin. But we only give it from Chullin, which is profane, unsanctified animals, and not from things which have been designated to the Beis HaMikdash as a sacrifice, which means that even to this day we are supposed to do this. Fascinating, and we might not appreciate this. So there's all kinds of things that are probably set up by different hechsherim as to whether they actually do give these portions to Kohanim or not, because there are different loopholes and different things that one can apply to not be able to pass these things on. But fundamentally, the Torah says that we're supposed to give these gifts. So I did try to do a little bit of research to see what the different hechsherim do, but I didn't really get as far as I wanted to. But it's just interesting to know that this is the halacha, and this is what we are supposed to be doing when slaughtering animals. Says the Mishnah, Shahaya Badin, we would have thought that we could apply the following piece of logic, a kal v'chomer, if you will. Uma ima chulin, she'enan chayavim b'chazeh v'shot, that with chulin, where you have no obligation to give the kohanim from the chest and from the back leg, chayavim b'matanos, and yet we have a halacha that we have to give kohanim these 3 gifts. Kodshim shechayavim b'chazeh v'shot, so we would have thought that sacrifice where you do have to allocate. So, for example, the korban shlamim, you do have to give the chazeh and the shok. You have to give the chest and the thigh to the kohanim. Eino din b'matanos. Should I not think, therefore, that I should also have to give them these 3 gifts? Talmud Lomar comes along the Torah and says about the parshas, about the korban shlamim, va'etein osam la'aharon hakohen ulevanav l'chok olam, that I shall give the chest and I shall give the thigh to Aaron and his sons and the Kohanim forever. Ein lo ela ma she'amar ba'inyan. But that's only in relation to the chazeh and the shok, to the chest and to the thigh. But these other three matanos, I don't have to give those to the Kohanim, but I do have to give these three portions, these three gifts. So a very interesting halacha over there. Mishnah base. So there are many halachas that talk about the redemption of consecrated animals. And if we are desanctifying, if we are redeeming these sacrificial sanctified animals, do we still have to give these matanos? Do we have to give these three gifts? So that's what we have to think about. Now, if it's a korban, which when it was consecrated, so when it was made holy, it was in a situation that it could never be brought. So, for example, a permanently blemished animal, so it was never going to be offered up. So when it gets redeemed, so it goes back to an almost entirely profane, unsanctified status. But the second type of korban is one which could be brought, but after you sanctified it, it then got its blemish. So those are the two different types of korbanos that we're going to be seeing in this Mishnah and seeing how it applies to these three gifts that we mentioned in Mishnah Aleph. So says the Mishnah, Kol HaKodshim shekodam mum kavua lekdeshan v'nifdu. Any sacrifice where the blemish appeared, or the blemish came before the sanctification, the consecration of this animal, and then it subsequently got redeemed. So it was never in a status of being able to be offered up, and then it got redeemed. Chayavin babachora uvamatanos. So if it was a firstborn animal, it now has its obligation as a firstborn animal, or meaning, that the offspring of this animal could become a firstborn, and it's also obligated in the matanos. So if you then go and slaughter it, then those three pieces have to be given to the Kohanim, the gifts. V'yotzin l'chullin, and they get downgraded, I suppose. They go out from their status of sacrifice and they become chullin, profane, which means lehigazes, which means that they can be shorn, uleheaved, and they can be used for ploughing, for labor. Uvevladan v'chalavan mutar la'achar pidyonan, and their offspring and their milk are going to be permitted after their redemption. V'hashoichatan b'chutz patur, and if you slaughter them outside of the Beis HaMikdash, well, it wasn't a sacrifice, so it's going to be patur it's going to be exempt from any punishment, because it's not a sacrifice. Ve'ein osin tumura, and it is not subject to tumura, which means that it can't be substituted. Can't take another profane animal and say that it should be in a place of a korban, because that only works if the korban was able to be brought, but it's not. The mesu yipadu, and if the animal dies before they were redeemed, then you can still redeem them after their death, because they were never valid sacrifices. Chutz min habachor u'min ha'maaseh, unless they were a firstborn animal, or they were a maaser, they were a part of an animal tithe, which means that their sanctity was inherent. So even if they were blemished, they were always sanctified, rather than a regular korban, which has its sanctity infused onto it. So a bechor, firstborn, and maaser, a tithed animal, they can't be redeemed. So it would still be given to a kohen, a firstborn, and it would still retain certain sanctity. And the maaser behema, the tithed animal, could be eaten by the owner, but it can't be redeemed. So there's interesting halachas by these types of animals. Kol shekadam hekdeshan es mumam, but if the consecration occurred and then it became blemished afterwards, or mum over lehekdeshan, or it had a temporary blemish before it was consecrated, ulachar mikan nolad lahem mu, and after that and after that a mum kavua, a permanent blemish emerged, v'nifdu, and then it got redeemed. P'turim min ha'bechora u'min ha'matanos. So now it's going to be excused from being able to give birth to a firstborn animal or from the gifts, because it retains some of its sanctity. V'einan yotzin l'chullin. It does not go out to be given a chullin status, to have its wool shorn or to have it worked with in the fields. Uvavladan v'chalavan asur, and its offspring and its milk are forbidden la'achar pidyonan, after their redemption. V'ashoichatan b'chutz chayav, and if you slaughter these animals outside of the Beis Hamikdash, then you're going to be liable for having done so. But osin tamura, and they can be substituted. V'imeisu yikaveru, and if they die, then if they died without being redeemed, then you have to bury it, because it was fit for being used on the Mizbeach, on the altar. Mishnah Gimel says the Mishnah, talking about a firstborn animal. So if the owner of a firstborn animal is a non-Kohen, then a Kohen can get these 3 matanos, can get these 3 gifts, because either it's a firstborn and he gets the whole animal, or it's not a firstborn and he would be getting the 3. But what this Mishnah is going to be contending with is, what if a Bechor gets mixed up with other animals? So what's going to happen to the Kohen with regards to being able to either receive the 3 portions or to be receiving the Bechor? He could end up in the situation where the Kohen actually receives none of the animal. And we have to remember as well, by the way, that the whole reason why we would give these pieces to the Kohanim is because they didn't necessarily have land of their own to be able to earn money from. So they had to be supported really by the rest of the Jewish people. So that's why they're entitled to all these different portions. That's an important thing to point out as well. So, says the Mishnah Gimel, B'chor shnisariv b'meah, you have a firstborn animal, and it gets mixed up with 100 other animals. Okay, so 100 animals where you should be giving the portions gets mixed up with the Bechor, where you wouldn't have to give the 3 portions to the Kohanim. So the Mishnah says, Bizman shemea shechatin es kulan, at a time where there are 100 different owners, there's 100 different people who are going to be slaughtering these animals. So the Mishnah says, Potrin es kulan, then you are exempting them all from giving the gifts, because each of those 100 owners could claim that their animal was actually the firstborn. And so if it was the firstborn, then you wouldn't have to give those 3 portions, those 3 gifts. What if echad shochet es kulam? What if one person is slaughtering all of these animals? So then potrin lo echad. So then only one of the animals is going to be exempt from giving a portion to the kohen. Hashochet la kohen v'la nachri. If you have a shochet who is slaughtering an animal for a kohen, and is slaughtering an animal for a nochri, a non-Jewish person, patur min matanos, then there's going to be an exemption for giving the gifts, for giving these 3 pieces to the kohen, because so the slaughterer doesn't have to give out these pieces, because a non-Jew is not obligated to, and a Kohen is also not obligated to. If a non-Kohen is partnering with either the Kohen or partnering with the non-Jew, so he shares some ownership with this animal, then we have to mark this animal to indicate that it is jointly owned, but it is exempt from giving these portions. But if if a Kohen sold his animal to a non-Kohen, and he stipulated that the animal is sold except for the gifts, then the Mishnah says, Patur min hamatonos, so then he is exempt from giving the gifts because they are not his, that has not been sold to him. Amar, if he said, Mechor li b'nei meyeha shel para, v'hayu bahem matanos, if he says, sell me the innards of this para, of this cow, and there were gifts included as well, noisnan lakohen ve'eino menakeh lo min adamim. So then he has to give these portions to the priest, to the kohen, and he doesn't have to get refunded for any of the value of the pieces that he is giving to the kohen. So if you haven't, so if the butcher is selling the inside of the cow, which includes the stomach, then that's going to have to be given to the kohen. But the guy who's buying these parts is not going to get refunded for the fact that he has bought these innards, and obviously that piece he's not entitled to because it has to go to the kohen. So he doesn't get any refund or compensation for the fact that he has bought those parts, but some of it has to go to a kohen. But says the Mishnah, lokach heimenu b'mishkal. But if he has bought a piece of meat or pieces of meat that are actually weighed, so he says, I want 400 grams of meat. Noisnan la kohen u'menakeh lo min adamim. So then he still has to give that body part to the kohen, but can you guys colour a little bit quiet? Go for showers, please. Okay. So he still has to give those parts to the kohen, but the value of those parts gets deducted from the sale because he asked for 400 grams, and he's getting less than 400 grams because he's giving 100 grams of a stomach to the kohen. So he has to get compensation. He has to get refunded for that value lost. And finally, Mishnah Daled of Perek Yud of chapter 10 says the Mishnah, Ger shenisgayer v'hai salo para. You got a non-Jew who has converted to Judaism and he has a cow. So nishchata ad shelo nisgayer. So if you slaughter the animal before he has converted, so what should the halacha be? Should he be obligated in giving these three parts or not? Says the Mishnah, Patur. He's exempt. Why? Because at the time of the slaughter, he was not yet halachically obligated to give anything to the kohen. Mishnah nisgayer. But if the animal is slaughtered after he converts to Judaism, so now chayav, then he is obligated to give these parts to the kohen because now he is a full-fledged Jew. What if, says the Mishnah, safek? Sorry, we need to scroll down. What if it's in doubt as to whether he had converted or not at the time of slaughter? So the Mishnah says patur. He is exempt from giving. Why? A very famous halachic principle, shahamotzi mechavero alav hara'aya, that it is upon the person seeking to impose a penalty or impose a halachic expectation. So if you are trying to break the status quo, then it is for the prosecutor or for the claimant to prove that you need to apply this halacha to the defendant or to the the plaintiff. So whoever it is that's going to be losing out, it's up to the claimant to prove that this person deserves to lose out. So this is a famous halachic principle that the claimant always has to prove that this person should be obligated to, in this case, give over these parts. Ezehu Azaron asks the Mishnah, let's define what these different body parts are. So what is the forearm? Min haperek shel arkuva ad kaf shel yad. So the Mishnah says that it is from the joint of the lower knee ad kaf shel yad until the upper two joints of the right leg, or on the screen there, until the rounded protrusion surrounding the thigh bone of the foreleg. V'hu shel nazir, and this is the same body part that's referred to in relation to the Nazir, who has to take the forearm or the front leg, the foreleg of the ram. He has to give that body part as well. Uchnegdo varegel, and the same equivalent joint in the back leg is known as the shock, is known as the thigh. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shock min aperek shel akuba ad sovech shel ragel. So Rabbi Yehuda disagrees actually and says that the thigh is actually from the joint of the lower knee until the upper knee joint. So all shlamim sacrifices have to have a shock given, a thigh given. So there's a machlokes as to what that body part actually is. So according to Tana Kama, it's one thing. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's another thing. So and then the Mishnah ends off Ezehu lechi. What is the jaw? What is the area of the cow's or the animal's body that is considered the jaw? Min haperek shel lechi ad pika shel gargeres. It is from the joint of the lower jaw until the upper ring of the windpipe. That is the halachic definition of the lechayoyim, of the jawbone, which would have to be given to the kohanim. And with that we say, Mazel Tov everyone, on finishing chapter 10, Perek Yud. Let's move straight on, unless we've got comments or questions. Let's move straight on into Perek Yud Aleph, into chapter 11. So we're going to be talking about other gifts, other things that get given when you are dealing with non-sacrificial animals. So the first one that we're going to be talking about in Mishnah Aleph is Reishis Hagez, which is the first shearings. When you shear the wool of a sheep, ram, whatever it might be. So the first shearings have to be given to the Kohanim. So the Mishnah says, Reishis Hagez, that's what we're talking about. Nohek ba'aretz v'chutz la'aretz. It applies in Eretz Yisrael and it applies outside of Eretz Yisrael. Now, biblically, there's no minimum amount that they have to be giving. Rabbinically, we put this as a sixth. So a sixth of the volume of wool that's being shorn is supposed to be given over to Kohanim. So the Mishnah says it applies in Eretz Yisrael and outside. Bifnei abayis v'shelo bifnei abayis. During temple times and after temple times. The Chullin, with non-sacrificial animals, aval lo b'mukdashim, but not with sacrificial animals. Says the Mishnah, Chomer bazroa u'velachayim uvakeva mereishis hagez. There is a stringency that applies to the three gifts that we mentioned in the previous chapter that don't apply to the first shearings of wool. Shehazaroa v'halachayim v'hakeva no'akim b'bakar v'atzon. The three gifts that have to be given to a kohen, that applies to bakar, which is cattle, and it applies to tzon. It applies to flock animals, like sheep. B'marube uvamuat. And it is going to apply to when you have a lot of animals and when you have a few animals. But by contrast, says the Mishnah, Voreshis Hagez, it's only going to apply to sheep, and it doesn't apply to goats, and it doesn't apply to cattle. And it only applies when you have a significant amount in total to be apportioning out to the Kohanim. Asks the Mishnah though, what is this amount? So the Mishnah says, Kama hu merubeh. How much is a lot? What is the number of sheep or the volume of wool that we have to be aiming for? So, where is the Mishnah? Base Shammai Omrim. Base Shammai says, Shtei rechelos. If you are shearing 2 sheep, that is considered a lot. Shneimar, as the verse says in Isaiah chapter 7, Yechaya ish eglas bakar ushtei son. That a man shall rear a young cow and 2 sheep, which teaches us that 2 sheep is the minimum amount to be considered son, to be considered a flock. So since you have to be shearing wool from your flock, the minimum amount is 2 sheep's worth. Uveis Hillel Omrim, Beis Hillel say chamesh, then actually it's at least 5 sheep. Shneimar, as it says in the book of Shmuel, Shmuel Aleph, chapter 25, chamesh son asuyos, that it says, and 5 sheep were made. So chamesh tzon, the fact that the number 5 is associated with the word tzon, means that according to Beis Hillel, 5 is the significant number that we are looking for over there. Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinas Omer, Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinas says, Chamesh rechelos gozazos maneh ufaras chayavos bereshis hagez. That it's not just the number of animals, but it's also the volume of wool that you're shearing. So when you've got 5 sheep and you're getting wool that weighs 100 dinar each and half paras, which means that you're totaling 150 dinars on each sheep, then you encounter the obligation of Reishis Hagez. Okay, so back into our Mishnayos after that short commercial break. The Chachamim say, Chamesh rechelos gozazos kol she'en, that it's about the number of animals. If you've got 5 animals, it doesn't matter how much wool is coming off, but 5 animals yields your obligation to give this portion of wool. How much are you supposed to give? Mishkal chamesh slayim b'Yehuda. So it should be the weight of 5 selah in Yehuda, shehin eser slayim b'Galil, which is the equivalent amount of 10 slayim, which is a selah is a coin's worth, particular value of coin. So 5 selah in the region of Yehuda, of Judea, which is 10 in the area of the Galilee, because the Galilean coins were double the value of Judean coins. Continues the Mishnah, Muluban velo soi, that you had to give this wool muluban, so it had to have been laundered, it had to have been processed and whitened or bleached, whatever the word is, velo soi, but it can't be dirty, sullied wool. Kedei lasos memenu beged katan. It has to be enough, basically, to be able to weave or sew or produce a small garment. Shneimar, as it says in the book of Devarim, chapter 18, Titen lo, that you shall give to him, which indicates shehei bo kedei matana, that it has to be a proper gift. It can't just be dirty, shmatter, gross, sullied wool that you're giving. You have to give him proper stuff. These are kohanim that we're talking about. Lo hispik litno lo ad shetzva'o patur. Says the Mishnah that if you didn't manage to give this gift until you had dyed the wool, then the Mishnah says that you then you are exempt from giving to the kohanim. You shouldn't do this, but if it happened, then you're now exempt. Libno v'lo tzva'o, if it has been bleached, if it's been whitened, and you haven't dyed it yet, then chayav, you're obligated. Says the Mishnah, halokeach geiz sono shel nochri. If you buy wool from a non-Jew, patur mereishis hageiz, so then this wool is exempt from giving to the kohanim, because it hasn't come from an animal which was owned by a Jew. Halokeach geiz sono shel chaveiro. If you buy the wool from your friend's flock, which is a Jew, im shier hamoicher. So the Mishnah says, if the seller kept any of the wool back, then hamoicher chayav, the seller is obligated to give it to the kohen, to the kohanim, because why is that? Because a buyer could always say, well, I never bought the portion that was meant for a kohen. That was still with the seller. So the seller has to still give that reishis hageiz. Lo shier halokeach chayav. But if all of this wool has been bought by the Jewish purchaser, then the buyer is obligated in giving the reishis hageiz. Hayu lo shnei minim. What if you have got 2 different types of sheep? So you've got shchufos ulevanos. You have got I've got written here brown spotted, but on the screen I think it's saying they're grey. But the point is, you've got two different colours. One is white and one is either grey or brown or spotty. Machar lo shechufos aval lo levanos. And he sold one colour but not the other. Zacharim aval lo nekevas. Or he sold the wool of the male sheep but not of the female sheep. Then each one has to give Reishis Hagez from the wool that remains. The seller has to give and the buyer has to give as well. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we say Mazel Tov on completing chapter 11. And we're still doing good for time, Mark. So let's go into chapter 12. And that's going to finish for us Maseches Chullin. So this is very exciting. Exciting except for the fact that the mitzvah that we're talking about in the final chapter of Maseches Chullin is the age-old favourite, Shiluach Hakein, sending away the mother bird and taking the eggs of that bird. So we're going to be talking about that mitzvah over here. Shiluach Hakein, sending away the mother bird over its nest. No heg ba'aretz v'chutz la'aretz. It applies in Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael. Bifnei abayis, v'shalom bifnei abayis. I hope we are noticing the repetitive structure in these opening chapters, in these opening mishnahs of each chapter. It applies at the time of the Beis Hamikdash and not and after the Beis Hamikdash, or when there's no Beis Hamikdash. B'chulin aval lo b'mukdashim. And it applies to profane animals, but not to sacrificial birds. Sorry, profane birds and not sacrificial birds. Says the Mishnah, Chomer bekisui hadam mishiluach hakein. There is a stringency that applies to that mitzvah that we saw a couple of weeks ago of covering the blood of after a slaughter. There's a stringency over there that doesn't apply to shiluach hakein. Why? Shekisui hadam noheg b'chaya uvaof. Because covering the blood applies when you slaughter an animal or when you slaughter a bird. B'mezuman uv'she'eno mezuman. And it applies to a domesticated animal bird, or it applies to non-domesticated animals and birds. V'shiluach hakein. But it does. But with regards to shiluach hakein, eino noheg ela ba'of. It only applies to a bird, to a mother bird. Ve'eino noheg ela b'she'eno mezuman. And it only applies to undomesticated birds. Ezehu she'eno mezuman. What do we classify as undomesticated or not readily available? Kagon avazin the tarnagolim shekinanu b'pardes. It refers to geese or chickens that have made their nest in a pardes. Aval im kinanu babayis. But if they have made their nest in a house, v'chein yonei hardasios. And similarly with regards to domesticated pigeons, and I believe they're named after Hordus, which is Herod, because he used to train birds in his house or in his palace. So patur mishiluach. Then these birds are exempt from the opportunity of sending away the mother bird. Mishnah base. The Torah says you have to send away the mother and then you have to take the chicks. But that's only going to apply, or the mitzvah is only going to be in place when theoretically you could halachically eat both the product of the eggs and the bird itself. So as long as they were fit or appropriate to be eaten halachically, then the mitzvah will apply. So that means that kosher birds only are going to apply. So the Mishnah says in Mishnah base, Of Tameh, with regards to a non-kosher bird, Patur Mileshaleach. So then it's going to be exempt from this mitzvah of sending away the mother bird. Of Tameh, Rovates al Beitzei of Tahor. What if you have a non-kosher bird which is nesting over the eggs of the kosher eggs? The Tahor Rovates al Beitzei of Tameh. Or you have a kosher bird nesting over the eggs of a non-kosher bird, Patur Mileshaleach. Then it's going to be exempt from the mitzvah because it has to be eggs and birds that could in theory be eaten. Korei Zachar. If you have got a father bird which is hovering, it says there on the screen, a male pheasant which is known to sit upon the eggs of its species. So if you've got a father bird which is nesting over its hovering and guarding over its species. Rabbi Eliezer Mechayev. Rabbi Eliezer says that the mitzvah would apply, and you are obligated to send it away. The Chachamim Potrim. The Chachamim say that you are exempt, that you don't have to send it away, because the mitzvah is sending away the mother bird, not the father bird. And the halacha, it would seem, is like the Chachamim. Mishnah Gimel. What if the mother bird is hovering, but she's not touching the nest? So we're going to see that it depends on whether the wings are touching the nest or not. Haisa ma'ofefes. If the bird is hovering, bisman sheknafeha nogos bakain. If the wings are touching the nest, chayav l'shaleach, then you are obligated to send it away. Ein knafeha nogos bakain. If the wings are not, if it's quite a bit off, not the ground, but the branch or whatever the surface of the nest is, patur l'shaleach, then you're exempt from the mitzvah. Ein sham ela efroach echad or beitza achas. If you've only got one chick there or one egg, chayav l'shaleach, then the mitzvah applies. Shneimar, because the verse says in Devarim chapter 22, it says kan, says the word kan, which is in the singular, or at least the nest is in the singular. Kain mikol makom, whatever the situation of the nest is, whether it's only one egg, one bird that's inside the nest, the halacha is still going to apply. Hayusham efrochim mafrichim. If you've got chicks in there which could theoretically fly away, or beitzim muzaros, or you have got spoiled eggs, patur milishaleach, then these are going to be exempt from the mitzvah. Shneimar v'ha'ein roveset, as it says in the verse, the mother is crouching al ha'efrochim or al ha'beitzim, crouching over the chicks or over the eggs. Ma efrochin. So now the Mishnah learns out. Ma efrochin b'nei kayama, just like the chicks are living, sustainable creatures. Af beitzim b'nei kayama. So too the eggs have to be sustainable, fertilized eggs. Yatsu muzaros. And this is going to exclude then unfertilized, spoiled eggs. Similarly, umah habeitzim srichin leiman, just like the eggs require their mother still to look after them, af ha'efrochin srichin leiman. So too the chicks need to still be relying on their mother for everything that they need. Yatsu mafrichin. So this is going to exclude a chick which is capable of flying away. Shilcha v'chazra. If you send away the mother and it returns, shilcha v'chazra, you send it away again and it returns. Afilu arba v'chamisha pa'amim. Even if it returns 4 or 5 times, chayav, you're still obligated to send it away. Shneimar shaleach tishalach. It says in the verse in Devarim chapter 22, verse 7, that you shall surely send away the mother. So however many times it takes to get it right, you still have to do it. Omar, if a person says, Hareini notel esa'im umishaleach esabanim, that I am going to take the mother and I'm going to send away the children, so I'm going to do this thing wrong, chayav l'shalech, you're still obligated to send away the mother bird. Shneimar shaleach tishalach esa'im, because as it says in the verse, you shall surely send away the mother. So even if you declare that you're going to do the situation differently, you're still obligated to send away the mother. Natal habanim v'hechaziran lakein. So if you take the offspring, v'hechaziran lakein, and then you put them back in the nest, v'achar kach chazra ha'im aleihem, and after that the mother comes and nests again on top of them. So then the Mishnah says, patur min shaleach, then you are exempt from having to send away the mother bird again. Mishnah Dalet, the punishment or the consequence of taking away the mother. Hanotel aim alabanim, one who takes away the mother bird with the offspring. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo keva eno mishaleach. Rabbi Yehuda says the person gets lashes for taking away the mother bird, and he does not then have to send away the mother. The Chachamim Omerim mishaleach ve'eno lo keh. The Chachamim say that you can fix it up. You can fix your mistake, and you can send away the mother, and then remove the need to be lashed. Zeh haklal, and this is also a famous halachic principle. Kol mitzvahs lo saseh. Anytime you have a negative mitzvah, prohibition in the Torah, sheyesh ba kumaseh, which has with it a positive commandment as well. So we have a commandment that we're not allowed to take the mother away with the chicks, or that we're not allowed to take the chicks without sending away the mother bird first. But we also have that mitzvah, shaleach to shalach, you can surely send it away. So what we have is a negative mitzvah, prohibition, which also has a positive commandment, a positive component to this. So if it can be rectified, if you've done the negative, if you've violated the prohibition, but it can still be fixed by doing the positive mitzvah, so then the halachic principle is ein lokin aleha. You will not be lashed if you've then been able to fix the mistake that you had made in that kind of instance. And finally, for Maseches Chullin and the end of Perek Yud Beis, chapter 12, the greatness of this mitzvah. Lo yitol adam eim al banim. You should not take a person should not take the mother bird with the offspring. Afilu letaheres hamatzora. Even if you need the mother bird to be able to do the purification process for a mitzvah, big mitzvah, you're still not allowed to take it, even for a mitzvah. And the Mishnah finishes off, Uma'e mitzvah kala shehi chisar, just like this very light, easy-going mitzvah, where you are not going to make any financial loss really at all. If you do, how much are you going to lose out? The value of an isar, barely anything. So if for such a light mitzvah, which involves no financial loss, and the Torah says, Amra Torah, leman yitavlach v'harachta yamim, there's a divine assurance of length of days for this mitzvah. So there's a very fascinating kal v'chomer over here. Just like by the mitzvah of shiluach hakein, which is such an easy mitzvah to do, and it incurs no financial loss to you at all, and yet you're still going to be rewarded with length of days. Kal v'chomer on mitzvahs chamuras shebetorah. All the more so that for all of the mitzvahs that we fulfill, where it could be very demanding, it could be very strict, it could be very expensive for us to be doing these mitzvahs, how much more so, says the Mishnah, are we going to be rewarded with leman yitavlach, that it should be well with us, it's going to be for our benefit, v'harachta yamim, and it's going to reward us with length of days. So how amazing, therefore, not only this mitzvah, but all mitzvahs in the Torah, that we have this kind of assurance, this kind of guarantee. And with that, we'll all say together the three words to finish off Maseches Chullin. We'll say them together 3 times. Nishlama Maseches Chullin. Nishlama Maseches Chullin. Nishlama Maseches Chullin. We have completed Maseches Chullin. Mazel tov, everybody, on this fantastic achievement. And that's all we've got time for this week. So join us next time when, please God, we will start Maseches Bechorot, talking about these firstborn animals. But in the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful night.